All right, welcome everybody. Happy Black Friday to you. As we record this today, it will not be Black Friday when you listen, but hope you all had a good Thanksgiving. This is Unemployed AF Dad, and I guess maybe Employed Mom. Is that your name?
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
Or just Adam and
Doesn't really
Leslie?
roll off the tongue.
No, it doesn't. Well, episode two, we want to first off just thank everyone who listened to the first episode. I didn't have much of an expectation going into it, and the response and feedback and support that we received was just overwhelming, unexpected, much appreciated. Not to say that we got like a million people that reached out to us, but I really didn't know what to expect. I thought maybe like, 10, 15 people would listen, and it was more than that. I won't say how many people, but it was more than that. And people were texting, and it was just really it felt good because number one, people relate to the content, but number two, it's always nice when people have your back, right? Especially when you venture out into a new thing like this.
Absolutely. This is definitely a uncharted territory for us. We've never done anything like this before, and there's definitely a level of vulnerability, putting yourself out there, and it was scary, and so it was nice to have like our community show up for us and show that support, and yeah, it was wonderful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, like you said, you definitely are putting yourself out there. And my logic behind it was almost like, is anybody gonna care? Is anybody gonna want to listen to me? Who am I? I bring nothing, no expertise. Like we said in the first episode, we're not experts. We are just going off of our life experience and where we're at currently in our alcohol-free journey. But yeah, that's kind of especially with posting online too, because we do have an Instagram. If you guys want to go check it out, it's a little more lighthearted maybe than some of the topics that we'll discuss on the podcast. So, but I was again like, who cares, right? Does anybody really need to see this? Is anybody going to react to this, or is it just going to be something they scroll on by because we're bombarded by all this content out there? So anyway, long story short, thank you guys so much for all the support. We really appreciate it. And thank you, Leslie, for just pushing me to get this content out there. Again, this is our first time. We had no idea what we were doing. Obviously, the audio was not great. So, for those of you who actually made it through the entire episode, kudos to you because I had trouble doing it. And we knew that going into it that the audio wasn't great. And we actually re-recorded the episode and it just did not flow as a normal conversation because it wasn't. We were trying to manufacture the first conversation we had, and that's not what this podcast is. It's literally just authentic raw conversation that you and I are having.
Yeah.
It's not scripted. We're not going back and editing. There's editing software out there now. You can take out your uhs and your umps and your pauses, and you can actually have AI re-record things that you didn't mean to say, and it's crazy, which that's awesome. Some people may need that, but that's not what we are. We want people to just kind of feel like they're in the room with us, having, listening to us have a conversation. And sometimes I will stutter. Sometimes I will say, or like, or, but hey, that's me.
Right, right. That's the appeal. I think is that it's real, it's natural, it's not scripted, and we sometimes don't know.
Sometimes I don't know what I'm going to say. So I say, so I can gather my thoughts. And I
Right.
think we all do
That's
that.
okay.
But again, yeah, thank you for just pushing me to get this content out because I could have taken 2, 3, 4 weeks just working on, trying to fix the audio issues. But if you're watching the video, which you can watch it on YouTube, you can see that we actually have these fancy new mics, and I hope it sounds much better. I mean, during testing, it sounded really, really good compared to what it was
Yeah.
previously. So I'm hoping that it really shows when you're listening to this on your audio podcast or watching on YouTube, whatever you prefer. So, anyways, now that we have that all out of the way, what are we going to talk about today?
We are going to be discussing kind of the signs that you might need to examine your relationship with alcohol. These are list of kind of like our personal experiences of things that we experienced ourselves that led us to the place that we are now. You and I just had that conversation not that long ago that we didn't just like wake up one morning and we're like, you know what we should do?
We should
We should
stop
just
drinking.
stop drinking. It didn't happen like that. It was years and years and years in the making, and fights and arguments and lots of distress, and it came to a conclusion
It's
over time. It wasn't something that we were just like all is well, but you know what, we should try this.
it's just like someone who, has gained a lot of weight or whatever. It's not like you just one day, woke up and you're like, oh my gosh, I've gained 50 pounds overnight. It's a buildup. It's a process. And I think that's the same with, people and alcohol. Obviously for us, there were many, many years and events that led to us finally saying, look, we need to make a change. There is definitely issues here that I think could be resolved by, cutting out alcohol.
Right.
But yeah, how do we identify that? What are we looking at? And so I think obviously the first thing is alcohol affecting your relationships? It could be with a spouse, and like in our situation, it could be with friends, it could be with your family, it could be with your children. Is it positively impacting those relationships, or is it negatively impacting those relationships? And I don't know many people that, well, I guess, you could, like looking back to our 20s, we thought it was positively impacting our relationships with our friends because we thought we were bonding and making all these memories,
Yeah.
which now that you look back, you're like, I wouldn't trade those moments, but it certainly wasn't probably the best way to build relationships. But,
I'm grateful we still have those friends.
I am too. Yeah. If you guys are listening, we love you, the family. But as far as, most relationships, I think if you look at statistics, alcohol plays a big part in a lot of domestic abuse and things like that. And, can make people more violent, and which certainly wasn't the case with us. But, looking back, it definitely was, like I said, a buildup of just one thing after another that kind of led to this final conclusion that we needed to make a change. So, what are some other things you think people, as far as relationships, when they can tell that alcohol is impacting and playing a big part in it, that it is probably not in a good way?
I think when you constantly have the same argument like over and over and over again, like you kind of feel like you're in Groundhog's Day. You're just like, I can't do this again. I can't have this argument again. I can't relive this day again. I think that is one of the biggest wake up calls or indications that you might need to reconsider your relationship with alcohol. If alcohol is, the common thread in that argument over and over again.
And for us, well, when we decided to go alcohol free, I know a lot of people said to me like, "Hey, why? Like, you don't have a drinking problem." And my reaction was, well, first of all, what is a drinking problem? How do you define that? But I was like, I clearly have problems that have resulted because of my drinking. I have, arguments with Leslie who we never argued, outside of, things about my drinking. Are very rarely argued, but, many, many problems, and other things that I won't get into at this point personally, just issues that came up from drinking, could be even health related. But I was like, so that to me, yeah, it was a drinking problem. I didn't have one in the sense of, I had lost everything and I was in the gutter with a brown bag, begging for money. I think that's what we kind of think of, that extreme. But a drinking problem could literally be, I have a drink once a month, but that time I do it, I get very drunk and, feel like garbage the next day and can't function. And it could affect my job. It could affect, spending time with my family. So, I don't when you say drinking problem, that can look different for many different people.
Yeah, absolutely. And different for different stages of life, too. Like, in our 20s, we were going out on the weekends and stuff like that, binge drinking. But at the time, I was like, this isn't, quote, a problem. We're just going out and we're having fun. But if we were leading that life now in our mid to late, okay, we're in our late 30s. There's
Can't
no
say
mid
mid
about it.
anymore.
And having two kids, like that would be a problem, right? Because it would impact so much. So yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the stage of your life and some other things. So like just being able to take inventory of where you are and what's going on in your life and how it's affecting you, how alcohol is affecting you.
And going back to relationships, I know with our kids, it affected them. Just this morning, actually, Bliss said to me, I'm so glad that you don't drink alcohol anymore. I said, oh yeah, why is that? And she's like, well, I always felt bad for you when you would stay out really late, and then the next day you wouldn't feel good. You'd lay in bed and not feel good. And I mean, she's young, but she's smart.
Mm-hmm.
She knows that because I did something, it had consequences, and they weren't good consequences. And so, just the fact that I don't want to be that example for my children, but it was affecting our relationship because there were many mornings where I was not the parent that I am. I know that I am,
Mm-hmm.
but I just didn't feel like I could. And there was times where I tried to put on that brave face, and I would be like, okay, you're good, and just not giving it your all. And the people can tell you're not present. You're there, physically, but mentally you're spaced out. You're like, oh my god, I just want to go back to bed. I don't feel good. So it definitely, even if you are like, oh, my kids are little, they're not going to remember this. It does impact them, and it is something that they do remember.
Absolutely. So two things with that story. One, um, how did it make you feel whenever Bliss said that to you?
Well, obviously, it makes you feel awful. But in the same respect, it also was like, well, I'm glad that she acknowledges that I'm no longer doing that, and that I'm a better father for it. And like she can see that already, just 7 months into this journey. Number two, it makes me think, why would I ever want to go back? You know, um, Even if I could control it, and only have a drink and feel okay the next day, the fact that there is now that correlation in her mind between me drinking and not feeling good the next day and not being present and there to play with her is something that I don't even want to come up.
And like what would that trigger inside of her? If you
Right.
did drink, like, oh man, Dad's not going to be feeling good tomorrow because I know that from experience. There was a second part to that after I asked my question. Oh yeah, it was kudos to you for every time that you quote didn't feel good, but you were really honest with her with all of those experiences. You flat out said like, hey, I did something really dumb last night. I drank too much alcohol. It makes my body feel terrible. I didn't sleep well last night. I don't feel good. Don't allow me to be an example. Alcohol is not bad, but when you drink too much of it, it can do this to you. So kudos to you for like being honest with her and not trying to like, just brush it under the rug and, just say like, oh, just not feeling good. Like, man.
I think a lot of times we don't give our kids enough credit because,
Mm-hmm.
again, with our kids being their age is, like, oh, they're small. They won't understand. They understand, and you can only say that excuse so many times. I'm not feeling the best before they're like, well, wait a minute. Every time he goes out, the next day he doesn't feel good. And I know when he's going out, he's drinking. I know, but also I didn't want to lie to our children. I didn't want to, I want to be as upfront as I can be. There are certain things that you kind of have to shield your kids from, and you maybe don't tell them the entire story until maybe they're ready for it
Mhm.
when they're older. But with alcohol, I never wanted to be like, I don't drink, and this isn't because I was drinking, and try to hide the fact that I make mistakes. I think that's really important for your children to know that we are human. We just because we're your parents doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, that we know
Uh,
all the
yeah, I was just
answers.
gonna say have all the
I
answers.
know growing up, I always thought my parents had all the answers, and I think a lot of kids do. And I think it's refreshing for kids to know that, hey, it's okay to mess up because my parents mess up.
Hmm.
I think if you have that expectation that your parents know everything and they don't make mistakes, then it puts that pressure on the child to be the same, not make mistakes and try to have it all figured out when really none of us have it figured out, right?
No,
Do you ever truly have it figured out? I don't think so.
no.
You learn a little bit more every day, but you don't always. You're never gonna, be this perfect person that doesn't make mistakes and is the perfect parent. It's always a learning process.
Yeah, very much so. I totally agree, 100%.
So we've talked about relationships a little bit. Again, if it's impacting alcohol is impacting a relationship in a negative way, clearly maybe you need to examine why you're drinking and if it could be beneficial to stop. I personally just think that based off of my relationship with you, relationship with my family, our kids, it's gotten much better
Yeah.
without alcohol. There were times where we had plans with my family and I missed it because I was hungover. They all knew it. There was no denying it. And they never shamed me for it, and they never made me feel bad about it really. But I felt bad about it, and I don't like the fact that I bailed on some of our events because I wasn't physically able to go. So obviously that makes it better when you're sober and feel good and can, go to those obligations and commitments and enjoy their company.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
So another thing to examine is how is it affecting your everyday life, your health, your job? Are you a productive person? Are you waking up every morning, and have a routine? Are you exercising? Are you eating well? Because I think we've talked about, alcohol has a domino effect, right? Like because you were drinking the previous night, the next day you don't have that motivation to do the normal routine that you may do. You're going to feel like eating garbage. I mean, we've all been there, right? You want fast food or you want to go eat like the biggest pancake breakfast in the world. I mean, no
Mama's.
offense to anybody who likes Waffle House, but I don't think I've ever gone there without drinking beforehand. It's never on my radar, but for whatever reason when we were drinking, Waffle House just sounded like, the best place to go eat.
Yeah, I completely agree. When you drink, you don't sleep well. You have that awful like pounding in your chest from your heart. You have the dry mouth. You're hot. Like you're so incredibly hot, and not like a hot where like you can just take the blanket off and then you're good. It's like this inferno inside of you that you're just like, good God, I don't. No amount of water is going to quench this. And so then obviously that leads to, not feeling well the next day because you didn't sleep good. And then, yeah, and then it leads to the like eating all the junk food and,
Well,
needing caffeine. And then you're short with your kids. And then you have shame because, you yelled at them because you were short tempered, because you're tired and, you don't feel well. It's a domino effect that, it costs you so much.
I don't know of a way to be healthy and also drink consistently, because especially as you get older and you just you can't metabolize as quickly and
Mm-hmm.
you're eating this junk food. I could eat junk food when I was younger and I was still skinny. As I gotten older, you can't eat the same things that you used to without like having to work extra hard to burn that off. And
But also too, like your GI system in general, like that gets affected so much
oh
by
yeah,
eating
heartburn and
garbage.
indigestion and acid
Yeah.
reflux. Ugh.
Yeah.
But, empty calories are coming from that alcohol you're drinking, right? And I know that I used to, my drink back in, I don't know, the day was like Crown and Coke.
Hmm.
So not only am I drinking, alcohol, but I'm combining it with soda, which has tons of sugar. It's terrible for you. And
Caffeine in it too.
yeah, caffeine in it too. And you're drinking that with alcohol. Then you're going and getting your, Waffle House meal or Taco Bell or whatever your choice is that night. And yeah, waking up and probably sleeping in late, laying on the couch most of the day. Maybe even for lunch, you're again eating fast food because you just don't have an appetite for much else. You just want the greasiest, biggest burger you can find or something like that.
Right.
So it's just very, very difficult to keep up that routine and be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't. I think if you stop and think about it, it's not going to be positively impacting your health. So if you are somebody who likes to be healthy and you want to, stay fit into your, 30s, 40s, 50s, it gets harder and harder to kind of consume not just alcohol, but soda, you know, uh, cookies, chips, whatever. It gets harder and harder to be able to consume that without you seeing the effects of it.
Yeah. Very much so. Very much so.
Another thing, examining how much money you are spending on your drinking, which is something that I didn't really ever think about until I stopped buying bourbon. And I realized, wow, you were spending a lot of money on bourbon. And it wasn't necessarily that I was drinking it all the time, but I would, for whatever reason, I wanted to kind of showcase it. I had my like little bourbon bar, and I was like, oh, I need 45 bottles of bourbon on my display.
And you would have like, like an inch left in some of
I
them.
didn't
And
want to
you're
get rid
like,
of
I
it. Yeah,
can't drink
I
that
can't get rid of
because
it.
it won't look, like
Aesthetically
aesthetically
pleasing.
how
Yeah.
it's not supposed to look.
But then also going out, it got expensive. We'll touch base on this later, but we took a trip recently, and it was our first trip together, alcohol free, and we did not spend nearly the money that we normally spend because, you go out to bars and, a beer is $7, $8, $9 depending on where you're at, and you're not just having one, and then you're buying, liquor is, even more expensive. Just for the two of us to go out for a night would be, 70, $80, if not more. And if you're consistently doing that, plus your meals, add that on. Alcohol is not cheap. I mean, you do have people who can probably buy like a 24 pack of Busch Light and for whatever it costs, and that's all they buy. Okay, but I mean, realistically, most of us are probably spending more on money on
More
alcohol than
bougie drinkers.
than we need to be. So examining that, I think, is really important, especially if you're on a tight budget, which who isn't these days, right?
Truth. Truth. Yeah, when you can't even, go to the grocery store without dropping at minimum like $100. Yeah, like weaseling some alcohol in there is just like it's not necessary. You don't need to because, fruit and vegetables are expensive enough.
I mean, I can't go into Target without dropping $200 these days, it seems like.
Oh, Target.
Is it benefiting your sleep? And I think I know the answer to this one for everybody is no, it's not, even if you think it is. I think we maybe touched base on this a little bit previously, but, people think, oh, I've had a lot to drink. It will help me go to sleep quicker. Or even,
Because it's a sedative.
yeah, even like, hey, to relax and calm down, I'm going to have a drink or two and then I'll fall asleep faster, which may be the case, but you're not getting into that deep sleep that your body really needs.
Yeah, you're not getting into that REM sleep. You're basically being sedated. You're not actually going through the sleep cycles that you need to go into in order to like do that detoxifying while you're sleeping. So I mean, obviously it's harming you more than it's doing good. It's sedating you.
There's a study from the Sleep Foundation, 2018 study, and it compared the sleep quality among people who consume different amounts of alcohol. And no surprise here, but people, the more they drank, the worse they slept, basically. Low amounts of alcohol, which is like fewer than 2 servings a day for a man and one for a woman, decreased sleep quality by 9.3%. Moderate, which is right at 2 for a man and 1 for a woman. This is per day, like 1 drink for a woman, 2 drinks for a man. Decreased sleep quality by 24%. And anything more than that, so more than 2 for a man, more than 1 for a woman, decreased sleep quality by 39.2%. So if you have, and most, again, when you go out, 2 drinks for a guy is not much. Like if you say, I only had 2 drinks tonight, that's still decreasing your sleep quality by 39.2%. So imagine how much worse it gets the more you drink.
Oh yeah.
And
Like at some point, there's zero sleep quality.
And I think we can all relate to that because there's been many nights that I can think back to after I drank where it's just so restless. Like, yeah, you do fall asleep quickly, but inevitably I would wake up only a couple hours later and either you have that dry mouth or just be so hot or have to go to the bathroom. And then it's a struggle to ever get back to sleep. And before you know it, it's like it's 7 in the morning and you're like, did I even sleep last night? And then, like we've talked about, it sets you up for failure.
Right.
That whole day, you're dragging and you have no motivation to do anything.
Yeah. I mean, sleep is pivotal and foundational, and alcohol just doesn't do anything for it. So, why not just avoid it?
I'm already not a great sleeper as it is.
That's true.
I have a difficult time falling asleep, and seriously, as soon as you hit the pillow, you're out, and I don't get it. Like, how do you fall asleep that quick? Like, we could be talking, and you could be mid sentence, and all of a sudden, I'm like, Leslie, and you're like, you're gone, you're out.
I don't know,
I've always
because
been jealous of
my
that.
battery decreases as the day goes on. So like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, yes, this is my time. It's the morning. I'm feeling good. Just got rest. And then as I go on, my battery gets less and less and less and less. And by the time, it's time to go to bed, like I'm done. I'm at 0.
So we talked about this last time, kind of a pros and cons list, right? So I would encourage anybody who is, examining their relationship with alcohol to make a pros and cons list. And it sounds stupid and silly, but I think it's just writing stuff down is powerful. It really is. And if you just take a look at the pros and cons list, I don't think that you'll probably have more pros and cons, I would guess. But it can, it can put it in perspective when you write it out and actually, in your situation, what is, beneficial, what is not beneficial. And I think most people would probably find that, there probably is no benefit to drinking alcohol. You might think that there is. You might think, hey, I need this to go out and have fun and relax and unwind. But ultimately, as we've discussed, it's doing more harm than good. It's not relaxing you. It's numbing you. And you will fall asleep, but you, again, will not get into that REM cycle that you need to recharge and be refreshed and productive the next day.
Yeah, for sure. I totally, me, I like to nerd out on all kinds of things, but a pros and cons list sounds like a great way to kind of just bring the intangible tangible, because a lot of times like we just have these thoughts like just like hanging out in our head all around, and they pop in and they pop out, but like actually being able to put pen to paper and like putting those thoughts down, I think that's a good representation of what a pros and cons list is like all these thoughts of like, I probably shouldn't drink, but well, what do my friends think, or what, whatever those thoughts are that pop up into your head. A pros and cons list definitely puts it into like a very tangible, real thing that you can see, and then you can be like, oh gosh, there's way more cons than there are pros here. Maybe.
And this isn't rocket science. I mean, again, there are podcasts out there that talk about this, and I think ultimately we know subconsciously that what we're doing is not good for us, sure. But I think you said this on the last episode, we don't want to stop and talk about it and think about it, because then we'll come to the conclusion that it's probably not good for us, and then we'll have to stop going out and having fun, right?
And
Or what
that
we perceive as fun.
Right. And that kind of goes with anything that we do in excess in our lives. So whether that is, consuming sweets, being on social media, like consuming too much social media, binge watching Netflix, shopping, I mean, anything that you do in an excess, like when you start thinking about it, somewhere, within yourself, like, this is not good. I don't need to be doing this. But when you do start to like confront that, you're like, but then if I acknowledge it, I'll know that I shouldn't do it again. And it's just like this cycle.
And we're not saying that there's anything wrong with binge watching something on Netflix or shopping.
I'm not shaming anybody for any of it, because I'm calling things out that, like, a lot of times I just, like, I'm talking to myself.
Right. But obviously, I mean, everything in moderation,
Yeah.
it goes without saying. We know
Yeah.
that you can't live your life all or nothing. You can't
No.
commit to something 100%. And, when, especially people in these, fad diets, and it's got to be a lifestyle, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to do it day in and day out, because a diet to me indicates that there's an end to it. It's only for a time. And I think you can relate that to alcohol. I've been asked a lot, like, what's the end goal here? Like, how long are you going? And I'm like, if you look at it that way, it's almost like, well, there's a finish line. And once I get to that finish line, then I can, celebrate and have a drink. And it's like, but that's not the purpose of this, right? And I think, again, and I apologize if I said this before, I lose track of what we've already talked about, but, you can't compare how long, your journey has been compared to someone else's, because, it doesn't matter, right? You don't know what that other person has gone through and what has led to where they are now. And don't get hung up on the numbers, right? 7 months is a long time. I think I feel good about what we've done, but in big scheme of things, it's 7 months is just a tiny little fraction of our lives, and I think it's just, it's not a good place to get into when you start thinking about, oh, I've gone this long and this long and this long, because I think that it sets you up for failure down the road. Because what happens if you do have a drink? Is that a failure? If you messed up and it doesn't not matter anymore, does that previous 7 months not matter? No, you gain so much experience and knowledge throughout that 7 months. And you know what? If you do have a drink, that's okay. Just the next day, let's start it over again, if that's what you choose to do.
Yeah.
So for the last couple of minutes, the first episode went a little longer, I think, than we anticipated. So anybody who listened to the whole thing, I certainly appreciate it. At the end of this, we want to just kind of briefly talk about that trip we were mentioning earlier. We went to Louisville to see a comedian, and it was really funny. And it was our first trip without alcohol, just the two of us. And previous trips kind of almost revolved around drinking. I feel like it was like, okay, we're gonna get there, and then what are we gonna do up until when we can drink? Like, if it's early in the day, what can we do until it's socially acceptable to finally start drinking? And then we drink all night, and then wake up the next day and kind of lounge around because we didn't really feel good. And then we go get that greasy burger or whatever we needed to kind of fuel us. And then we'd go out and do it again the next night. But this trip was completely different than that, and it was refreshing.
It was. I think in times past when we have gone away together, it was like, oh man, we don't have the kids and we can finally cut loose. And it was like this big exhale. And for whatever reason, alcohol was like, that was our exhale. That was what we could, use to relieve whatever kind of stress we had. And this time, it was so wonderful to recall the entire trip. That's always fun. But also too, to really be able to like experience it with each other
And
the
be in
whole
the
time.
moment, right?
Yeah.
Like, not worry about what's going to happen in a couple hours, where we're going to, like, let's just
Yeah.
enjoy what we're doing. I think I told you earlier, like, just sitting in a coffee shop, and previous trips, I would have probably been like, okay, and after this, let's go get ready. We can go hit a bar or pregame, whatever. And just to be sitting in that coffee shop and not care about what we're going to do next,
Yeah.
and not have it set around drinking was very refreshing.
It was. It was. And I think we did stuff that maybe in previous trips we wouldn't have done. We wouldn't have sought out like fun things to do. It would have been just like you said, revolved around like, okay, when are we going to go out next? Because that's the fun part. And like, let's just get to that. Let's fast forward through all this.
But then it ended in us having to drive home.
Mm.
And we were exhausted because we'd been drinking all weekend, hadn't got great sleep. And what were we driving home to? To see our kids. And they're so excited to see us. And we're just kind of like, oh my God, we're so tired. Like,
Oh, we just go
kind
to
of,
sleep.
right. Kind of like, we're excited to see them too, of course, but, just not 100% present for them. And it was really great to, be well rested and come home and ready to hang out with them and have fun and do whatever they wanted to do. That was a complete 180 from our previous trips.
Yeah. And I know, when we got home, well, usually when you get home, the kids are a little bit out of sorts. They haven't been in their normal routine. They're in a different environment. And, sometimes they can be just a little bit more emotional and just kind of let things out, as soon as you get there. And I know that if I have not been feeling well all weekend because, you've been drinking, you just have less of a capacity to be able to deal with those things, to like help your kids through those big moments of being able to just hold them and be like, hey, I know it was probably a really fun weekend, but also like you're not in your routine and you missed us a lot. Like it would have just been really hard to help them navigate those big emotions. But I was so grateful that, we got home and that happened, that I was able to just scoop up our little boy and just hold him and just be like, hey man, it's okay, like let's just sit and cry. You can just cry, it's all right.
And I think that's relatable to a lot of people, because what is the expectation when you go out of town or go on vacation? Like, oh, it's time to relax and kick back and have a few drinks. I'm on vacation, I don't have any responsibilities. But you still do. You still have a responsibility to come home and be, present, because you just were away from your kids for however long. Or even if your kids are on the vacation with you, still there's just, from the outside looking in, a lot of, trips we've taken to tropical places, resorts, that's the expectation. You're going to be drinking a lot, all day, and then go out and drink at night for dinner. And you're just, again, not completely present, enjoying every moment. You think you are at that time, but you're numbing yourself. You're not able to fully appreciate where you're at and just, the beauty of where you're at if you're on a beautiful island. So I think, ultimately, alcohol is not enhancing your vacations. It's even though you think it might be. But I would encourage you to take a sober trip and just compare it. See if it was more fun. And I think ultimately probably will be.
It'd be better for your relationship too.
Right.
I thought it was.
I think next episode we're gonna maybe take a turn and not talk about alcohol free. Maybe talk about relationships. I know we have a little game that we bought last year or something with some cards that I thought it'd be kind of fun to read some questions and see how we answer, but also if you're listening, kind of how you and your spouse or your friends or whoever would answer those questions too, and maybe do some reflection. But really appreciate you guys listening to the second episode. We're in the thick of it now. We got that first episode out of the way, and hopefully gain some momentum. And again, thank you guys so much for everyone who listened. We hope you found the content really valuable. And again, this is a community, right? We want to hear from people. We want to talk about things that relate to you. And we hope that we continue to do so. But if you have any feedback or any topics that you'd like us to talk about, hey, feel free to reach out. We also have an Instagram, a YouTube, all that stuff. So you can contact us that way. Keep leaving reviews, subscribing to the podcast. We appreciate everything.
Yes, thank you so much. We appreciate you all so, so very much.
Hope you all have a great week.